Y'all need to hear this because this story right here, this ain't just about some rap beef fading into the background or a career hitting a wall after one bad move. Nah. This goes way deeper than surface-level drama or a few lost streams. This is about a man who made every single wrong move at every single right moment, then had to stand dead in the middle of the wreckage, staring at the shattered pieces of everything he built from nothing, wondering how the hell it all crumbled right before his eyes like sand slipping through his fingers no matter how tight he gripped. We're talking about Black Youngsta, real name Sammy Benson. That pure South Memphis dude, born and raised in the trenches where survival ain't promised to nobody. Every single day feels like walking through a live minefield, and the only way out is to fight tooth and nail or get swallowed whole by the streets. He came from literally nothing. No handouts, no rich family connections, no industry plugs waiting in the wings, no safety net to catch him if he slipped. Just pure raw grit, bottomless hunger, and a voice that sounded like gravel mixed with straight ambition. The kind that hits you dead in the chest, makes your hair stand up, and forces you to believe every single word coming out his mouth because it felt lived, not scripted. This brother clawed his way up from the absolute gutter, grinding mixtapes on the concrete streets, building his own label from scratch, stacking real millions in the process, earning genuine love and loyalty from his whole city. And then in what felt like nothing more than the blink of an eye, watched it all slip away, evaporate, disappear into thin air like smoke from a fired gun. But what makes Black Youngsta's downfall hit different from your average everyday rapper fell-off narrative is that it ain't just about the music slowly drying up. Bad album rollouts that flopped, weak marketing, or streams tanking because the algorithm decided to switch up on him. This one is tied way deeper, to unbreakable loyalty tests that eventually went too far. A murder that sent shockwaves through the entire game and changed Memphis rap forever. And the unforgiving streets of Memphis, finally stepping up to collect what they felt was long overdue, after years and years of brewing tension, hidden grudges, and silent warnings. The craziest part about the whole situation? He saw the red flags and danger signs coming from a mile away. The side eyes from the industry, the shifting energies in the city, the whispers behind his back, the growing isolation, but still. He walked straight into the eye of the storm like a dedicated soldier who didn't know how to turn back or retreat, even when retreat might have saved everything. Let me break it all the way down for y'all with no filter, because the real untouched tea on Black Youngsta is something the blogs, gossip pages, and even some insiders been tiptoeing around for years, too scared to connect every single dot out loud in case the streets came knocking. Today we're laying every bit of it bare on the table. No chaser, no sugarcoating, straight facts mixed with the harsh reality of how this game really works. When the cameras stop rolling, to really understand how we got to this low point, we gotta rewind all the way back to the painful beginning in South Memphis. One of the most violent, most overlooked, most underserved, and most forgotten zip codes in the entire United States of America. This ain't the type of neighborhood that ever trends for feel-good success stories, community wins, or shining examples of upward mobility. Nah, it only pops up on the news when another body drops, when the body count keeps climbing, when the endless cycle of poverty, desperation, street justice, and generational trauma keeps spinning like a broken, blood-stained record that refuses to stop. Sammy Benson grew up knee-deep, neck-deep, soul-deep in that brutal environment, with no silver spoon, no famous relatives opening secret doors, no family money as a cushion, and literally zero safety net if he ever stumbled. Just the cold block, the daily hustle, the constant sound of distant or not-so-distant gunshots ringing out at night, the pressure to get it by any means, and that burning, unquenchable fire in his belly that simply refused to let him stay down or accept defeat no matter how many times life tried to knock him flat. He started dropping music as early as 2012, flooding the streets and the trunks of cars with his debut mixtape, Fast Bricks, then quickly following it with Fast Bricks 2 and Fast Bricks 3, each one rawer and hungrier than the last. No major label budget, no fancy studio cosign, no big-name features to boost the numbers. Just pure independent grind the exact way real Memphis rappers have always done it since the days of the underground legends. Pressing up physical CDs by hand, hitting every corner, every trap house, every club. Every barbershop building a grassroots buzz from the bottom up until the whole city had no choice but to pay attention and respect the work. He stayed consistent, stayed relentless, turning out tape after tape, banger after banger, until the momentum became unstoppable. Then in 2015, everything flipped in his favor when he dropped that breakout record called Heavy. Man, if you ain't heard it yet, stop whatever you're doing and go pull that joint up right now because it still bangs just as hard. That record hit like a fully loaded freight train barreling through the hood at full speed. Raw, unfiltered energy pouring out. Bass knocking so heavy it rattled windows and trunks for blocks. Lyrics that painted vivid, unflinching pictures of the struggle, the come-up, the defiance against all odds, the pain of the streets, and the pride of never folding. It wasn't cleaned up or polished for mainstream radio play. It was authentic street music made strictly for street people who lived that life every day. Yo Gotti caught wind of it, heard the potential, and reached out almost immediately. Within just a few short months, Black Youngsta found himself officially signed to Collective Music Group, CMG, which at the time was exploding into one of the most powerful, respected, and feared rap labels coming straight out of Memphis. Just like that, the script changed. From scraping by with zero budget to linking arms with one of the city's true heavyweights and power players. That's the real street edition of the American dream playing out in real time, fam. Living proof that if your grind is hard enough, your talent undeniable, and your heart unbreakable, even the harshest environments can sometimes crack open the door. Youngsta grabbed that opportunity with both hands and ran with it full speed, like his entire future depended on it. Because in many ways, it did. He dropped solid projects like I Swear to God in 2015, Baby Jesus in 2016, kept the fire alive with Shake Some, and stayed prolific, releasing heat on a consistent basis while that undeniable authenticity radiated from every bar. People ate it up not because of hype or marketing budgets, but because he wasn't fronting or pretending to be something he wasn't. He was South Memphis through and through, repping the hood without apology, scars and all, and the city loved him right back for keeping it 100. By 2017, he leveled up even more by founding his own imprint called Heavy Camp right there under the protective and powerful CMG umbrella. He was building something real, stacking wins on top of wins, positioning himself as a key player and future pillar inside one of the strongest regional rap structures the South had seen in years. The future looked nothing but bright. Bigger tours, bigger money, more respect, expanding influence. The whole glamorous package that comes with making it. But while he was enjoying that upward rise and soaking in the city love, a silent, deadly war was already quietly brewing underneath the surface in the Memphis streets. And whether he asked for the position or not, Black Youngsta was about to step into the spotlight as the loudest, most visible, and most aggressive face and voice representing one entire side of that conflict. This is exactly where the story turns dark, complicated, and irreversible. Because without the complete raw context on this long-running beef, none of the tragic fallout that came afterward will ever fully make sense to outsiders. Around 2014, another hungry Memphis rapper named Young Dolph was making serious independent noise on his own separate path. Born Adolph Thornton Jr., originally in Chicago but raised deep in the Memphis culture, Dolph had built his entire lane completely on his own terms. No major label chains holding him down. No big cosigns needed, just his paper route empire imprint, pure hustle, and an unbreakable independent mindset. Yo Gotti and the CMG camp tried to bring him into the fold early, but Dolph looked them in the eyes and said no thanks. And that single rejection planted dangerous seeds of tension, ego, and territorial disrespect that would slowly grow into something monstrous, ugly, and eventually fatal over the coming years. Fast forward to 2016 when Dolph dropped his debut studio album and boldly titled it King of Memphis. On the surface, it was just an album title flexing his status and confidence. But in the concrete streets, where claiming any kind of crown actually means claiming territory, respect, power, and dominance, that move landed like a direct slap across the face to Gotti and everybody in his camp. It felt like Dolph was standing in Gotti's own backyard, looking him dead in the eyes, and declaring himself the true ruler. That's the exact moment Black Youngsta stepped forward as the designated enforcer and protector of the CMG honor. On March 2nd, 2016, he posted a raw Instagram video going straight at Young Dolph without holding anything back, calling him soft, questioning his real street credibility, claiming he wasn't even truly from Memphis like that. Then he escalated it to another level by physically rolling up deep into Dolph's own South Memphis neighborhood with his full crew. Strapped up, filming the entire confrontation like he was openly daring anybody to step outside and handle it man to man. That wasn't soft internet trolling or playful disses for likes. That was a full-on public declaration of war with real bodies and real consequences on the line. He followed that aggressive video with the hard-hitting diss track Shake Some, loaded with vivid bars about Mac 11, extended clips spraying 100 rounds telling Dolph to lay low or get laid down permanently, and painting him as a fraud operating in his own city. The energy was palpable. The streets felt every word, but it also poured gasoline on a fire that was already dangerously close to exploding into real violence, far beyond music. Then came the terrifying night in February 2017, down in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dolph was there performing at an event tied to a major college basketball tournament. On the 25th, his vehicle got absolutely lit up with well over 100 rounds of gunfire while he was inside a nearby location. The only reason Young Dolph walked away breathing that day was because that SUV had been specially bulletproofed. Black Youngsta, along with a couple of his known associates, ended up arrested and charged in direct connection. Multiple serious felony counts including discharging weapons into an occupied vehicle and conspiracy to commit harm. These were no joke, life-altering charges that could have ended everything right there. But the case eventually fell apart due to evidentiary holes. Youngsta maintained a solid alibi, placing him in Durham at the exact time, and prosecutors admitted they couldn't definitively put him inside the actual shooter vehicle. Charges got dropped, but the emotional and reputational scars from that night, those literal hundreds of bullet holes and the figurative ocean of bad blood, never faded or healed. Dolph kept pushing forward, building his independent empire stronger, stacking bitter wins, and proudly repping self-made success for everybody watching. Youngsta stayed ride or die loyal to CMG, kept barking loud for his team, but the beef between the two sides never truly died. It simply went quiet and underground, simmering dangerously, with both camps still circling each other like seasoned predators who instinctively knew the final explosion was only a matter of time. Real recognized real in Memphis, and everybody plugged into the culture understood deep down that this situation was far from over. Everything exploded and changed forever at 1:05 p.m. on November 17, 2021. Young Dolph pulled up like normal to Makita's Cookies, a beloved local bakery right there in his own neighborhood, a spot he deliberately supported to put real money and resources back into the same community that raised him. He was doing exactly what he always did best: being present, giving back, living authentically without putting on any fake superstar front. Two masked men walked up and opened fire, without mercy. Adolph Thornton Jr., young Dolph, was pronounced dead at just 36 years old, leaving behind a grieving partner, young children, extended family, and one of the most genuine, respected, and inspirational legacies that Memphis rap had ever produced. The entire hip-hop world went into absolute shock and mourning. Memphis shut down in grief. Tributes poured in from every corner of the culture, big names and small. This wasn't simply losing another rapper to street violence. This was losing a powerful symbol of independence, authenticity, and refusing to let the streets or the industry fully define your ceiling. Where exactly was Black Youngsta when the news broke? He went noticeably silent for a short period, and sharp-eyed fans immediately noticed the absence. But then came the move that accelerated his downfall at warp speed. Just days later, he performed at a concert in Dallas and chose to pull out Shake Some, that same old Dolph diss track right there on stage while Dolph's body was barely in the ground. The internet absolutely lost its collective mind. Optics were catastrophic and unforgivable to millions. No matter how deep street codes run, you don't get on stage and perform a diss against a man who was just murdered in cold blood in his own hood. It didn't look like loyalty or street politics anymore. To most watching, it looked cold, heartless, even celebratory of the tragedy. But Youngsta didn't stop there. He followed it by dropping a new track called I'm Assuming, and the official video showed him walking solemnly through a cemetery, stopping directly in front of a gravestone with the name Thornton clearly visible for the camera. Young Dolph's government last name. The backlash became absolutely nuclear across every platform. Fans dragged him, peers spoke out, industry veterans weighed in, and the court of public opinion convicted him on the spot. He tried defending himself on Instagram Live and posts saying he came from South Memphis where sympathy and fake mourning ain't part of the culture, and he refused to put on a mask or act like somebody he wasn't. On one level, you can respect a man who stays true to his roots and doesn't flip-flop for public approval. But fam, there's a very fine line between keeping it real and being straight reckless. And in those heated moments, he couldn't see or refuse to acknowledge that he had crossed it badly in the eyes of the wider world. What happened next defined the rest of his career's downward spiral. Rumors exploded that Yo Gotti had quietly dropped him from CMG. Blogs and outlets ran wild with the story. Gotti eventually addressed it, calling the reports fake news and affirming Youngsta was still family and a boss, who couldn't be dropped so easily. He even appeared on later CMG projects like the Gangster Art album in 2022. But something fundamental had shifted forever. Even if the paperwork still said he was connected, the energy, the momentum, the public goodwill, and the industry support had all evaporated like morning dew. The perception had hardened, and once that happens in this game, it's almost impossible to reverse completely. Then the deeper investigations into Dolph's murder started revealing layers that dragged everything into an even darker light. 3 men eventually faced charges: Cornelius Smith Jr., Justin Johnson, and Hernandez Govin. Govin's documented connections to the broader CMG ecosystem raised serious eyebrows across the culture. Court testimony alleged that Govin had ordered the hit, acting at the direction of Anthony Big Juke Mims, who is Yo Gotti's own brother. Prosecutors laid out a clear theory. The long-running tension between CMG and Dolph's paper route empire wasn't only about rap disses and egos. It involved deep financial motives, control over territory, streaming money, and street power that ultimately ended in assassination. In September 2024, one of the accused triggermen, Cornelius Smith Jr., took the stand and confessed details, testifying that Big Juke had placed a $100,000 bounty on Dolph's head. He and Johnson had stalked Dolph for days, knowing his annual Thanksgiving turkey giveaway routine, waiting patiently for the perfect vulnerable moment. They finally caught him at the cookie shop and opened fire. Smith chillingly said on record, "I wasn't feeling nothing at the time. I was just trying to get some money." Let that cold reality sit with you. A man with a real legacy, family, and independent empire was killed over money split 3 ways, all stemming from a beef that started with an album title years earlier. Justin Johnson was convicted and sentenced to life. Hernandez Govan went to trial in 2025 and was acquitted, a surprising verdict that sent fresh shockwaves and debates through Memphis and hip-hop as a whole. To be crystal clear once again, Black Youngsta was never criminally charged or indicted in connection with the actual 2021 murder of young Dolph. No paperwork ever named him as a planner, shooter, or direct participant. But the streets have never operated strictly on court indictments or legal verdicts. They run on reputation, proximity, association, who was seen where, and whose name kept coming up in the conversations. Youngsta had been the most loud, visible, and aggressive soldier on the front lines of the CMG versus Dolph war for years. The Instagram videos, the physical roll-ups, the diss tracks, the Charlotte arrest, all of that meant his name became permanently attached to the shadow of the tragedy whether he wanted it or not. People weren't only asking who physically pulled the trigger anymore. They started asking who helped create and fuel the toxic climate that eventually made the trigger possible in the first place. And that larger question had Black Youngsta's name written all over it in bold letters. While he was still navigating that heavy public fallout and the growing shadow of the murder trials, his personal life was simultaneously being torn apart in the most painful ways imaginable. On August 18, 2023, at a BP gas station on South Parkway East in Memphis, another man was shot and killed in cold blood. It turned out to be his own brother. Think about the weight of that for more than a second, no matter how hard you claim to be. No matter how many diss tracks you dropped or how many times you said the streets couldn't touch you, when your own flesh and blood gets murdered in the same city you rep so proudly, the whole world stops spinning. Everything changes in that moment. This wasn't even the first sibling Youngsta had lost to the same senseless violence. Over the course of his entire rise, he had already buried multiple brothers, each loss carving deeper wounds that no amount of fame, money, or tough talk could ever fully heal. The brutal irony of it all is impossible to ignore. Here was a man who had spent years being the loudest voice and face in a rap beef that ultimately contributed to a real murder, dropping cemetery videos and performing disses, all while his own family members were being systematically taken by the exact same violent streets he claimed to represent and understand so well. The streets truly give, and the streets truly take away without warning. And at that point, Memphis still wasn't finished collecting from him. Fans and online commenters showed dolphin emojis under posts about his brother's death, proving exactly how poisoned the well of public opinion had become. No matter where you stand on the beef itself, a man losing his brother to gun violence should at minimum draw some basic human empathy, but Youngsta had burned through so much goodwill and crossed so many lines that even in his darkest, most vulnerable hour, a loud portion of the public refused to extend any grace. That's the real long-term price you pay when the narrative about you hardens into something negative. His music output noticeably slowed down. His public appearances and social media presence faded into the background. The whole energy around him shifted from rising star to damaged figure, clearly carrying heavy, unseen burdens. On top of all the emotional and cultural damage, the long trail of legal issues that had followed him for years kept piling on extra weight at the worst possible times. In 2019, he and some friends got pulled over for a simple red light violation in a GMC Yukon. Officers smelled marijuana, searched the vehicle, and found multiple pistols along with marijuana. Youngsta caught a felony charge for possession of a prohibited weapon, specifically armor-piercing ammunition, a serious mark that doesn't go away easily. Then, in October 2020, during another routine traffic stop in Dallas, police found a handgun positioned between his legs while he was a passenger. He was booked on unlawful carrying charges. Each one of these incidents became another distraction, another court date, another stack of legal fees, another headline that no publicist could spin positively. Even when cases eventually got dismissed or dropped, the accumulated baggage created a trail that made future opportunities harder to secure, deals more risky, and perceptions more tainted. That kind of sustained pressure over many years doesn't just break you physically, it grinds you down mentally, strategically, and creatively, until the arc of what could have been a legendary career bends and distorts under the weight. And then came the strategic move that confirmed what many had suspected for a long time. Just days before the high-profile Hernandez Govan murder trial was scheduled to begin in 2025, the very trial that would once again put CMG name's Big Joke and the entire Dolph saga back under the national microscope. Black Youngsta publicly announced that he was no longer affiliated with CMG. Let that carefully chosen timing sink in completely. This wasn't some quiet, low-key off-season announcement dropped casually. This was deliberate, public, and perfectly timed, right before the most explosive chapter of the story was about to dominate headlines again. It wasn't coincidence. It was a man who had finally read the room correctly and realized that continued proximity, even indirect, had become a liability too heavy to keep carrying if he wanted any chance at a future. Whether the split was fully mutual, quietly forced, or building behind closed doors for years remains unclear to outsiders. What is clear is that the announcement spoke volumes without needing extra explanation. When you choose to separate yourself from a powerful label right on the eve of a murder trial tied to its inner circle, you are intentionally creating distance, drawing a visible line in the sand, and signaling as loudly as the streets allow that you need to be viewed separately going forward. The internet didn't miss a single beat. Timelines were dissected, connections mapped, and the full picture of his journey, from early rise to soldier role to distancing, got analyzed endlessly. His departure wasn't merely ending a business contract. It felt like the final page closing on an entire turbulent chapter. And for many observers, it read like an admission of awareness, if not guilt. A man acknowledging that the orbit he had lived in for so long carried consequences he could no longer outrun or ignore. Zoom all the way out, and you start to see that Black Youngsta's story isn't isolated. It's part of a repeating pattern in hip-hop that we keep watching play out across generations, without the game ever fully learning the lessons. He was a soldier who proved almost too effective and too loyal at his assigned job inside the CMG ecosystem. His role was always to be the frontline enforcer, the loud aggressor, the one willing to step out first, take all the arrows, absorb the heat, and draw the fire while the higher-ups and other artists stayed protected in the back. He made the threatening videos. He dropped the most direct diss tracks. He showed up armed in rival territory. He caught the arrests and the public blame. Meanwhile, CMG as a whole continued to prosper and expand. Yo Gotti solidified his empire-building status. Moneybagg Yo rose to become one of the biggest streaming forces in all of rap. ESTG and Glorilla broke through with their own distinct sounds and massive hits. The label became a certified powerhouse with multiple stars shining bright. But notice that none of the new faces who eventually carried the flag forward were the ones stuck in the daily crosshairs of the Dolph situation. That burden fell almost entirely on Youngsta. He took every risk, absorbed nearly every consequence, and displayed loyalty like few others. But when the cultural and street bill finally came due, in the form of Dolph's death, the trials, the shifting public mood, he ended up holding more of the bag than anyone else, while others had quietly repositioned to safer ground. That's the cold, unsymmetrical truth about demanded loyalty in any hierarchical structure. Whether street or corporate, the ones at the bottom who show the most die-hard commitment often receive the least protection when the walls start closing in. Youngsta rode harder for CMG than almost anybody, yet when the ground began shaking violently, he found himself standing more isolated than ever. His personal losses added even more tragic layers. Losing multiple brothers to the same violence he once glorified in music created a pain that no interview or social media post could adequately capture. The streets that once elevated him now seemed to punish him relentlessly. Meanwhile, the younger wave of Memphis talent kept evolving. Key Glock, Dolph's cousin and artistic heir, continued pushing Paper Route Empire forward, dropping consistent projects and winning over new fans who craved that independent, self-made energy. The lane Dolph carved by saying no to CMG back in the day only grew wider and more respected after his passing. New listeners discovering Memphis rap today often start with Dolph's catalog, Key Glock, or the current wave rather than circling back to the artists most publicly tied to the opposing side. Streaming numbers, playlist placements, festival invites, and brand deals all reflected that cultural shift. Black Youngsta still possesses real talent, that gravelly voice, the authentic South Memphis storytelling, the ability to make records that bang in cars and clubs. Heavy still resonates because it came from a genuine place. But perception in this streaming era is currency, and being perceived as being on the wrong side of a now sainted legacy like Dolph's became a commercial and cultural anchor weighing him down. Yet the story doesn't have to end in permanent decline. Sammy Benson is still alive, still relatively young, still in possession of that same voice and lived experience that first made him special. If he ever decides to strip away some of the armor and tap into real vulnerability, not the defensive, I don't care what y'all think, street armor that often masks deeper pain, but honest reflection on choices made, consequences faced, brothers lost, lessons learned, and the heavy price of unchecked loyalty, there could still be a powerful redemption chapter waiting. Plenty of artists across hip-hop history have crawled back from darker holes with raw, reflective music that connected on a human level and rebuilt careers. Stronger. Memphis itself has a long tradition of resilience, from the horrorcore pioneers in 3-6 Mafia to the current stars balancing street credibility with mainstream success. Youngsta could still carve a renewed independent lane through heavy camp, maybe focus on mentoring the next generation, telling more nuanced stories stories, or even addressing the past head-on in the music without glorification. Survival is what got him this far, but legacy requires evolution, consistency, and sometimes the courage to show the parts of yourself the streets taught you to hide. Right now, he's navigating that quiet in-between phase. Independent, regrouping, figuring out the next move after the CMG chapter closed. The music career sits in a challenging spot with real hurdles, but talent like his doesn't vanish overnight. The culture moves fast and forgets slowly, but it still respects those who demonstrate growth and authenticity over time. Black Youngsta's full downfall isn't a simple, clean cautionary tale about going broke, getting locked up once, or signing a bad contract. It's far more complicated, more human, and more layered than that. It's the story of a man who rose from the absolute bottom through sheer force of will, talent, and street intelligence, only to get locked into a soldier role that ultimately defined and consumed him more than his actual music ever could. It's about a rap beef that began over something as seemingly small as an album title and pride, but spiraled into real-world murder trials, lost lives, and permanent scars on an entire city's rap identity. It's about personal tragedies, brothers taken too soon by the same environment he once celebrated, that never received the space or empathy they deserved because the public narrative had already hardened against it. It's about a man who, when he finally grasped the full gravity of his situation, did the only thing his instincts allowed: create distance, go quieter, and try to survive another day. Depending on your own background, that decision can look like growth, like calculated survival, or like a quiet retreat. The truth probably contains pieces of all three. What remains undeniable is that Sammy Benson entered the game with every single ingredient needed to become a lasting Memphis legend. The undeniable talent, the unmatched grind, the deep organic connection to the streets, and the citywide love at his peak. Somewhere between that explosive rise and the painful fall, all of it got swallowed up by a war that was never entirely his to fight alone, and a brand of loyalty that was never going to be returned in equal measure when the consequences arrived. The culture moves fast but remembers the real ones, and the story of Black Youngsta stands as a stark reminder that in this unforgiving game, the biggest threat to your legacy is almost never your declared enemies on the outside. It's often the choices you make, the roles you accept, and the lines you cross when you believe the cameras aren't rolling, and the streets will always have your back. Y'all know where to find me if you want more. Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. What move should he make next to flip the script? Should he address everything head-on in a project, stay silent, and rebuild quietly, or something else? This Memphis saga still has endless layers left to unpack, and the game never stops handing out hard lessons to those willing to listen. Stay locked in. Peace.